Welcome to Unpacking Life's Crazy. I'm Esperanza Phoenix, and it's that time of year. The time of year when people talk about magic. Today I'm here to talk about a special kind of magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms might be something that you hear about at some trippy music festival, but I'm here to talk to you about the renaissance of mushroom therapy. Therapists are looking into psychedelic therapy again after a long hiatus, and it's being used to treat things like anxiety, PTSD, insomnia, and even addiction. So I'm here to share with you my experience with magic mushrooms. Let's unpack this. So if you've listened to my podcast in the past, you will know that I already have one episode discussing my experiences with magic mushrooms and why I took it in the first place. So if you want to go back and review that, you can listen to the podcast, which is episode 3, Into the Woods About Shrooms. Now, before I go any further, I need to give you a disclaimer. This is not medical advice. And it could be risky. The main risk is that magic mushrooms are still illegal in many parts of the United States. However, it has been decriminalized in some places, and I just happen to live in one of those places. So if you use them, not only is there possible medical risk, but there is possible legal risk. It is decriminalized in Oregon, I believe, although they're still working out some of the details, and also Santa Cruz, and also Oakland. So now that we've covered the disclaimer, let me explain the space. As you can see, I have kind of these trippy colors behind me, and that isn't because of some sort of trippy music festival vibe, although it's kind of fun. I am an artist and a healer. I used to be a massage therapist. I used to do energy healing. And when I started branching out into some of my own therapies, I wanted to have a sacred space where I could practice. So as an artist, I took this super cool teepee that I found and I painted it. So you can see some pictures of what it looks like on the outside, but in the inside, it has this really cool sort of stained glass effect, which I enjoy when I do some of my energy work. I enjoy chilling here and doing meditation. But when I take mushrooms, I'm generally not tripping. To go back to the fact that I'm an artist, as I showed you, this lovely little mushroom, this is not an actual mushroom. This is one of my sculptures of an Amanita muscaria mushroom, which don't grow around here, and I've never actually taken these, but I create these cool little Christmas ornaments for my Etsy shop, and that comes back to another psychedelic mushroom LSD topic episode. I did an interview with a guy named Tom Baum who does psychedelic comedy shows in Las Vegas. He sometimes travels. And we got to talking about many things. He saw a painting of one of these mushrooms that I'd put as a backdrop and told me this super cool story about how it ties into the whole Christmas theme and flying reindeer and Santa Claus colors and all that stuff. So I wanted to get an ornament for my tree of this particular mushroom, and I didn't find any that I really loved. So I went and sculpted a few, and then I added them to my Etsy shop. And I also started making some fun earrings. So as I am a one-woman show, and this show doesn't earn any income, if you want to support what I'm telling you and what I do, I encourage you to go to my Etsy shop, Esperanza Paints. It's esperanzapaints.com. Buy something cool for your tree or buy a gift or whatever, and that helps me out. So Why do I take mushrooms? Well, like I explained in the first episode about mushrooms, I did a great deal of research first. And I encourage you to do the research yourself if this is something you're curious about. Do a lot of the work yourself. There's books on it. There's wonderful documentaries. I highly recommend a Netflix documentary series by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. And it covers all the psychedelics. It covers LSD, psilocybin, which is the active ingredient that in mushrooms that gives it both the therapeutic quality, but also can get you high. What else does it cover in there? Oh, it also covers peyote. Now, peyote is one of those things where unless you've been offered to do it ceremonially, then please don't mess with it. Part of the reason I have a painted teepee is because I am of Native American descent, and although the tribes that I belong to don't practice that kind of ceremony, it is a sacred thing for them. And since there's a limited supply and it grows in a very small area, it's best you just don't mess with that. Okay, so I don't use LSD. I never have. I explained this in the other episode, but I was never someone who used drugs recreationally. It's just not something that I've done. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not pissing on anybody who does. That's your thing, whatever. But I went into the use of both marijuana and mushrooms for medicinal purposes. And for me, marijuana was because I suffer from fibromyalgia, which is a disorder that causes widespread nerve pain. And I've been dealing with that for many years before I did the research and found that cannabis really helped with that. So luckily in California, it is 100% legal. At the time it was medical. And so that helped me a lot. And then as I was dealing with my anxiety and PTSD and depression and insomnia, all of those things, I came across information about ayahuasca. It's a special tea that also has hallucinogenic effects, and people have been able to really improve their symptoms of PTSD and anxiety and other issues like that by going through the ceremony. But generally it's like in Peru and stuff, and costly to get there. It's kind of a big thing to try to arrange that. So in my research, I found that medicinal or magic mushrooms had a similar effect. So then I started trying to figure out how to get my hands on this. And I did mention this in the other episode, but it just so happens that I had a friend on Facebook who posts a lot of pictures of mushrooms. So I was like, that's interesting. And I'd run into this guy at a few music festivals before, and I thought, that seems like a guy who might have a way to get his hands on some magic mushrooms. So I messaged him, sent him a private message, and he got back to me and he said, hey, yeah, you're in the Bay Area and I know a guy. So there is an unusual church in Oakland that actually practices mushroom ceremonies, and they also act as a dispensary. So I was able to reach out to this Church of Medicinal Plants and become a member. And since that time, I have experienced a few hallucinogenic doses of mushrooms, which I discussed in that episode. But more significantly, I have started using microdoses on a regular basis, and it has made all the difference in the world. Now, the first time I started doing this was in March of 2019. So here we are on pandemic lockdown, talk about anxiety. I was terrified that my boyfriend might get COVID and he's got asthma, and I didn't know what that might do to him. It was a very scary time. And it just so happened that I had done this research and I was starting to experiment with the microdosing. And so you might be asking, okay, what is a microdose? Well, one of the nice things about this church is they actually hand out this lovely guide. It covers dosing. So if you're going to go into microdosing, get yourself a scale, because you don't want to just guess it. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can get the actual mushrooms and then weigh them out on the scale. I like to weigh them out so I know exactly what I'm getting. And then I have a mortar and pestle. I grind it up real good. I put it in a shot glass with a little bit of water, a little bit of lemon. Apparently lemon is supposed to help metabolize it or something. And then I just take a shot down, and it'll take between 30 minutes and an hour for me to start to feel anything. A microdose would be 0.05 to 0.3 grams. Now, a common dose, just so you have some comparison, would be 1 gram to 2.5 grams. So that would be a dose that somebody would trip on. But the point of a microdose has nothing to do with tripping. It has to do with sort of repairing the pathways in your brain. So as I mentioned, I have anxiety, I have PTSD, I have insomnia. I used to suffer from depression, although that hasn't been as much of an issue with me for a while. And because I have those conditions, I have tried many medications in the past. So don't think that I'm just anti-pharmaceuticals. Don't try any psychiatric meds or any meds for those conditions. And certainly in a lot of states, you don't have an option to try things like LSD or, oh, that's the other one I forgot, ketamine. Ketamine is another one. You don't have the opportunity to try those alternate therapies, and if you are seeing a psychiatrist or whatever, they have you on some psych meds. I'm certainly not saying go off your meds and do a bunch of shrooms. Don't do that. You have to be cautious. And I had been getting cognitive therapy, talk therapy for many years. I've been working on that before I even considered taking mushrooms. But right now there's a lot of research into the good that can be done. And they discussed that in that documentary that I mentioned. But apparently it helps break through and repair some of the pathways in your brain. And that was one of my fears, having gone through all of this therapy, was that, when all was said and done, I felt like I had done as much of the work as I could, and I was sort of stuck. There's another complication. I had been on a medication for several years called Wellbutrin. And Wellbutrin is a medication which is an SSRI. And it affects the same receptors in the brain that the psychedelic therapies affect. So it's basically like this little pocket that takes in those chemicals. And if it's blocked by the Wellbutrin, it's not going to take in those chemicals. I didn't know this the first time. I had tried mushrooms, like once of this music thing, and it didn't have any effect at all. Maybe it made me feel a little more relaxed, but I didn't trip or anything. It's really very disappointing because I thought I was being very brave and I was going to try it. Okay, I was in my 40s, so I don't think, oh yeah, some kid tried. No, I was in my 40s before I even tried that. And it was very disappointing. And then later, when I did this research, I realized that it was because I was taking Wellbutrin. So in order to even try this mushroom therapy, I had to wean myself off the Wellbutrin. Wellbutrin gets out of your system pretty quickly, so it didn't take long for me to clear out my system. And then after that, I did try a larger dose, and I had an experience, which I talk about in that other podcast. And then I did some microdosing, and it's amazing how much it improved my anxiety, to the point of, frankly, if you've had lifelong anxiety, you don't necessarily understand that you have anxiety. That's just how it's always been. Always, like, overthinking and freaking out. And it really was a part of my insomnia too, because I'm lying there in bed at night, and instead of sleeping, I'm remembering a conversation I had 10 years ago that did not go well, and wondering, what could I have said? Or I was at some event and I'm thinking about it, and oh my gosh, what were they thinking? Oh my gosh, did I say the wrong thing? Did I upset someone? I would worry about my driving, just anxiety about the littlest things, anxiety about big things. And one of the really ironic things is I did some kind of crazy stuff when I was younger. Like when I was 16, I took off in a car and I followed my boyfriend all the way to Canada. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's like so brave, or whatever. I'm realizing it was driven by a couple of factors. One, having a terrible home life and dealing with trauma. Also, I had been diagnosed as a child with ADHD. I am not adult diagnosed yet. I've been waiting 9 months in order to be reevaluated for that. But so I was impulsive, absolutely. However, it wasn't necessarily brave, because my level of anxiety was such that I got the same anxiety about loading my car and taking off to Canada with about $25 in my pocket as I would get filling out paperwork, say medical forms, or having to take a test. Like everything was just high, super high anxiety. So after I started microdosing, my anxiety came way down. Like after I do a dose, I would suddenly just be more baseline, more chill and calm. Not like I wouldn't have anxiety about a normal thing, like if the smoke alarm goes off, you react, but I wasn't freaking out about the little insignificant things. One of the mistakes that some people make is they will like microdose daily. And the reason this can be a mistake is it does not take long for you to develop a tolerance of magic mushrooms. And then it has less and less effect, which is kind of a good thing. So if you're like afraid, oh my gosh, if I try mushrooms, I might become addicted. It's highly unlikely, because at some point you're going to have a tolerance and you're not going to get an effect from it anymore. Another thing is that they have found that magic mushrooms actually has a benefit in treating people who have addiction. It like changes the mindset, and they no longer crave things in the same way that they used to crave things. So that's an added benefit. I would say the main risk is legal. If you're in a zone where it isn't decriminalized, then that could be a risk. But as far as the danger to yourself, sorry, I have a little visitor here. You gotta sit in my lap? Okay. All right, I have a guest. As long as you follow instructions about having a safe setting that you feel comfortable in, and it's best to have somebody around who can help to monitor in case you start, feeling like you're going crazy or something. And this is with a major dose. A microdose isn't going to cause this kind of reaction anyways. But for a more major dose, it's kind of good to have someone there who you trust, to make sure that you don't do anything crazy, decide to go running out in the woods naked or something like that. But it's not something that people overdose on. The governments have really exaggerated the health dangers of these plant medicines. And there are many political reasons for that. And so here's my little PSA, because as we are headed into Halloween, we also happen to be headed into the midterm elections. So I want to encourage you to vote, because if you do want to see the decriminalization of plant medicine, elect Democrats, because they're the ones who are moving to do that. So then we come back around to that medicine aspect of it. And there is currently research with various therapies, especially for PTSD. And until it gets decriminalized, things like LSD and ketamine and magic mushrooms are not going to be available for some of the people who need it most for treatments like PTSD. For example, our veterans. As long as it is considered a Schedule 1 drug federally, then our veterans don't have any access at all. So even if a veteran lives in a state where it's legal, like many of our veterans could really benefit from medical marijuana instead of opioids to treat pain issues, but they can't take it because it is federally illegal. And anything that is a Schedule 1 federally can't be accessed by the Veterans Administration for treatment. So again, vote. It's important. All right, where was I? So this episode was just to catch up a little bit and let you know that yes, I have continued my mushroom therapy, and I got a little lazy about it for a while. It was like, okay, well, I brought my anxiety down, so that's good. And I kind of forgot about my regular maintenance. And so I realized, okay, well, I only did a microdose a couple times in this month, and then I could feel my anxiety start to build. And I realized I was getting kind of freaked out about little things again. And I was like, oh, see, one of the other things I've also been very diligent about is keeping track. I have a planner that I use to keep track, partly because of the ADHD. So I like keep track of little things, what chores I want to get done throughout the week, so I just don't forget to do them. Daily tasks, things that some people might think are silly that I need to check off. Habits that I want to develop, like meditation or yoga. But I also have kept track of every time I microdose. I put a little mushroom sticker on that page. I put what my dose was and what kind, because there are a lot of different varieties of magic mushroom. And the variety I prefer happens to be Golden Teacher. I can't always find it, but I do like that. And generally, for me, I like to take 0.18 grams to 0.2 grams seems to be a nice happy place for me. If I take closer to 0.3 grams, I will have a little bit of a trippy experience, which isn't a bad thing, but that means that during the time of my microdose, I get very little done. And some of the mushrooms make me a little sleepier. But if I do 1 to 2 doses, microdoses a week, I find it keeps my my anxiety down more. If I'm in a particularly anxious time, for example, around the holidays, I might make sure that I get at least 2 doses, and I'll stretch it out about, every 3 days or so. So, work it out about every 3 days. And one of the other therapies that I mentioned in the podcast, which has been really beneficial to me, is EMDR. However, it is not good to take mushroom doses while doing EMDR because the eye movement, okay, let me think about this. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR, it can kind of break into your subconscious a bit. I mean, that's the whole point of it, is to help you reprocess some of those memories. And if you are on mushrooms, it can be harder after you've gone through the session to come back to your baseline, to come. Chewy, I'm doing a podcast. Just relax yourself, man. It can be harder to bring yourself back to the room and back to the rest of your day. So my therapist prefers that I don't do microdose on my EMDR days. So that kind of, I usually do EMDRs on Mondays. So then like Tuesday might be a microdose day. What was the other thing that I really wanted to tell you? Okay, so microdosing helps with the anxiety. I have also, some people will say, because it can make you sleepy, they will say that they like to take it in the evening. And as I mentioned before, I'm disabled and I'm an artist, so I'm not on a schedule where I have to get up and go to work, so I'll have to worry about microdosing around a work schedule. However, if I take it at night, I find it really affects my dreams and my sleep in a negative way. Like I just don't feel especially rested. So for me, I prefer to take it around 10 in the morning. And, oh, that was what I was going to say. Usually it's about in your system for about 6 hours. So if you've got things you need to do and you want to make sure that you got your head clear, you want to make sure that you allow for it to work its way out of your system. And clearly, because it is, hold on a second, Chewy. Okay, I know you hear me talking, you think I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people. You need to go on, go to your spot, go. Sorry, Chewy was being distracting. Where was I? ADD. Really sucks sometimes. So, let's see. Microdosing, days of microdosing. So back to the fact that it isn't legal or decriminalized in a lot of states. Some people do grow their own magic mushrooms. And here's the thing. And again, back to the disclaimer at the beginning of the show, I am not condoning this or encouraging this in any way because you could put yourself at risk. While it is illegal to ship magic mushrooms to states where they are not decriminalized, there's an interesting loophole in the law. And that is that for scientific research purposes, you can order syringes of mushroom spores and cultivate them yourself. Although cultivation is technically a problem. The spores are, so that you can look at them under a microscope and I don't know, maybe experiment with how things affect the spores. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what one does with the spores other than cultivating them, but it is legal to order the spores for scientific research or science fair projects, I guess. So if you perhaps had a science fair project or wanted to do some research, there are companies, and you can do an internet search and find some of those companies and experiment yourself. Now, there is one warning about the safety of the use of magic mushrooms, and that is that in rare occurrences, people who have a family history of psychosis like something major like schizophrenia or something like that, they say there have been occasional psychotic breaks. I haven't seen documentation of this specifically, and it would be a very rare thing, but you should be aware. Certainly, if you have a family that has that kind of a history, you would want to be even more cautious. And again, I don't encourage anybody to just go off willy-nilly any of their psych meds in order to experiment with this. But I had done a whole lot of the work before I even considered this. And but it's really, really changed my life. I'm doing more. I'm enjoying life more. My boyfriend and I took a trip to France in April, and it was amazing because we've traveled internationally in the past before, and it's always a lot. I mean, travel causes anxiety anyways. You're catching planes, you're in places you're not familiar with, you're in sleeping situations that you're not familiar with. And with my insomnia, then I have anxiety about whether or not I'm going to get enough sleep. And it's amazing how much more I enjoyed the trip without the added irrational anxiety. So yeah, huge difference, life-changing differences, and I'm just incredibly grateful that I live in an area where I had access to magic mushrooms. And there are also books that you can order about foraging for magic mushrooms, and they do grow all over the world. And you'll find, if you do a little research, that cultures all over the world have been utilizing magic mushrooms. The Amanita muscaria mushroom being one of them. The shamans, like in Siberia, they dressed in red and white, and they believed that it took some of the toxins out to allow it to pass through an animal first. So they drank reindeer pee, because apparently reindeer like to get high on these things. Flying reindeer Christmas thing. Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down when it comes to magic mushrooms and some of the more interesting stories. But that's my story, and I encourage you to do your own research. It is the season of magic. I've always loved Halloween, got a background in theater. I wanted to share how this magic has improved my life, and hopefully for some of you, you'll be able to do your own research and it will improve yours. And more and more companies are doing the research on how to make mushroom therapy available to the masses. And that's a great thing. If we get to a place where instead of just cognitive therapy or EMDR or, regular psych meds, and frankly, if you do the research, the psych meds really have not, they haven't really improved lives in the way that people had hoped that they would. The percentage of people whose conditions dramatically improve with psychedelic therapy versus traditional pharmaceuticals, it's amazing. So if we can get this off Schedule 1, perhaps one day you can go to your local Walgreens or CVS or whatever pharmacy and get a little jar of mushroom capsules that are going to bring down your anxiety and help you in amazing ways. And in fact, the healing plant church that I go to not only offers mushrooms in the dried form, but capsules as well, which are really nice because they're already specifically measured out to 0.2 grams. So if I have to travel I have that as an option. Or if I don't feel like grinding up mushrooms and dealing with it, I can just real quick just take one and go about my day. So thank you very much for listening to Unpacking Life's Crazy and hearing a little bit about mushroom therapy and how it's helped me. And again, I'm a one-woman show, so if you want to support what I do, you can go to Esperanza Paints and buy some of my artwork. Or if you just want to buy me a cup of coffee, go to buymeacoffee.com/ESP Phoenix and make a donation. That'd be awesome. Thanks a lot. And until next time, take care of yourself and the ones you love. Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Unpacking Life's Crazy. You can show your support by liking and subscribing. Visit my Etsy site to check out the super cool hand-sculpted mushroom ornaments.